Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for Berkshire Green Drinks. This event is organized and sponsored by Berkshire Environmental Action Team, also known as BEAT. If you don't already know about BEAT, you can find out much more on our website, thebeatnews.org. And also on our website, you can easily stay in the know just about environmental happenings in our area. So we have a community calendar where we compile events and other programs that environmental organizations and individuals are putting on, and they send those to us. We also have an environmental jobs board, and that just has local and regional job postings. And then twice a month, we go through the state's environmental monitor and compile a list of the really big projects that we think everyone should just be aware of and keep their eye on for the Berkshires and Connecticut River Valley. And then we also have this page of public notices that we update once a week, and they mostly consist of notices about upcoming Conservation Commission meetings, but there are other environmentally relevant ones there as well. And you can actually find all of that in our bi-weekly newsletter, the Beat News, which you can sign up for in multiple places on our website. So many of you already know this, but Beat is a 501c3 nonprofit. And so that means all of our funding comes from grants and generous donations. So programs like this one, this monthly series, which is free for all, are only possible thanks to those who support BEAT. So if you would like to support BEAT, you can do so by going to our website. There's a donate button up at the top, and there are several ways you can go about supporting BEAT, and you'll find those there. And thank you. We also have a few upcoming events that I would like to briefly highlight. This Friday and Saturday is the annual Berkshire Biodiversity Day, also known as Berkshire BioBlitz. If you're not familiar with BioBlitzes, they're events that focus on finding and identifying as many species as possible in a specific area over a short period of time. So for the Berkshire BioBlitz, or Berkshire Biodiversity Day, we also schedule presentations and demonstrations led by experts and guided walks, which are all free and open to everyone. And then anyone who is interested in contributing to the biological survey and keeping a list of the species they find, anyone can do that. So if you're interested, definitely join us. And some scheduled highlights for this year include a presentation from Charlie Eisman about native plants and their host-specific insects, a reptile, amphibian, and small mammal walk with Professor Tom Tyning, and a mist netting and bird banding demonstration led by Ben Nickley of the Berkshire Bird Observatory. But there's so much more than that, and it's taking place at Berkshire Community College in Pittsfield and begins at noon this Friday. And you can visit BEAT's website or berkshirebioblitz.org to learn more. And then next Monday, September 16th, Rosemary Wessel, the director of No Fracked Gas in Mass, which is a BEAT program, is presenting about Project Maple. Enbridge, the gas company, wants to expand its 1,100-mile-long pipeline system that runs from New Jersey through New York and into Rhode Island, Connecticut, and Massachusetts. So they're calling this project Project Maple. You can learn all about it online next Monday at 6 p.m. Just be sure to register, and you can do that by visiting the link here on this screen. And I do believe it will be recorded as well. And then next month, Daniel Hanshey, who is the founder of Spur Wonder and an evaluator with Tracker Certification North America, is speaking at the October Berkshire Green Drinks on Wednesday, October 9th. Daniel will speak about the art of wildlife tracking, and will shed some light on the hidden lives of local wildlife and teach us how we can be more aware of the subtle and often not so subtle signs that animals leave behind. This will be in the normal hybrid format, but we're still sorting out the in-person location. So stay tuned for that. You can find out more on our website. So I think that's all I have for everyone. Thank you again for joining us, and thank you to the speaker this evening, Jennifer Longsdorf, for taking the time to teach us all about bats. If everyone could please stay muted during Jennifer's presentation, that would be really helpful and appreciated. But feel free to put questions and comments in the chat throughout the presentation, and we'll have a Q&A and discussion after Jennifer is done. And yeah, I'll stop sharing my screen and hand it over to you, Jennifer. Thanks for being here.
Okay, let me try to share my screen. Hopefully there's no issues. Okay, can you all see that? Yes, okay.
Yes, looks good.
Okay, great. Okay. All right, so well, first, thank you for having me. I've got lots of information to cover, so I'm just going to jump right in and get started. I'm excited that you all are just as excited about bats. For some background, I work for the Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program, which is a program within the Massachusetts Division of Fisheries and Wildlife, or MassWildlife. So NHESP is responsible for the conservation and protection of hundreds of vulnerable species that are not hunted, fished, trapped, or commercially harvested in the state, as well as the protection of the natural communities that make up their habitats through the implementation of the Massachusetts Endangered Species Act, or MISA. So we're essentially responsible for protecting the state's wide range of native biological diversity through research and data collection, habitat management, rare species recovery, education and outreach, and environmental impact review. So for an outline of how my presentation is organized, today I'll be talking about the ecological benefits of bats, some fun myths and facts, the different species in our area, environmental stressors affecting bat populations, what's been done to protect bats in Massachusetts, the results of some local studies, and how you can help bats with a focus on bat houses. So bats are amazing creatures that have long been misunderstood. More than 20% or nearly a quarter of all mammal species are bats, and they are the second largest group of mammals in the world behind rodents. Contrary to popular belief, bats are actually friendly, useful creatures. In fact, bats are often considered a keystone species because they play a critical role in our ecosystem and are vital to the health of our environment. Bats are used as an indicator of the overall health of our ecosystem. And bats in our area are all insect eating, so that's what I'll be focusing on tonight. But in other parts of the world, there are fruit eating and nectar feeding bats, which are beneficial in other ways, such as plant and crop pollination, seed dispersal, and forest regrowth. Bats are the primary predators of night flying insects like mosquitoes, beetles, and moths, and that includes disease-carrying insects. And flight is an efficient form of travel, but uses a lot of energy. So because of this, bats have fast metabolisms and can eat up to 1,200 mosquitoes in a single hour. Many bats consume over half of their body weight in insects each night, with some species consuming up to their whole body weight in insects each night. And 70% of the more than 1,400 species of bats in the world are insectivores. So therefore, bats act as an organic pest control and are nature's way of controlling the insect population. So one study on little brown bats showed that they gained about 1 gram during the first hour of feeding each night, which is about 13% of a bat's body weight and roughly equivalent to a 150-pound person eating 19.5 pounds of food in a single hour, which is quite impressive. And by controlling insect populations, bats are also important to agriculture, forestry, and human health. So bats are economically important to farmers because they eat crop damaging insects, which allows farmers to use fewer pesticides. This saves farmers money, makes our food safer, increases our crop yields, and reduces the amount of chemicals released into our air and water. Bat droppings, which are called guano, are very nutrient rich, containing nitrogen, potassium, and phosphate, and can be used as an organic fertilizer. Bat guano is one of the richest and most concentrated natural fertilizers known and is highly valued by organic farmers. Many people buy and use bat guano in their home gardens. And also guano from cave roosting bats provides important nutrients that supports the growth of a variety of cave creatures. Bats also play a significant role in science, technology, and medicine. Research conducted on bats has led to advancements in flight and sonar capabilities, navigational aids for the blind, drone engineering, vaccine development, blood clot medications, artificial insemination, and low temperature surgery, among many other things. So now you know why bats are important. Thought we'd talk about some fun bat facts. So bats are the only mammals that can truly fly. The flying squirrel and flying lemur can parachute or glide for short distances, but they cannot sustain flight. Bats are skilled aerial acrobats with powered flight. And we know they're mammals because they're warm-blooded, they nurse their babies with milk, and they have fur. Another fact is that bats navigate and hunt for insects using a type of natural sonar called echolocation, similar to dolphins. Bats essentially see with their ears, and they can make up to 160 calls per second as they close in on their prey. And most bat calls are ultrasonic frequencies that are too high for humans to hear. And bats can tell the size, shape, and texture of a tiny insect from its echo. Many bats eat while they're flying, which makes it difficult for some bats to make the squeaks out of their mouths. So many bats use echolocation out of their noses, and these bats have special flaps and folds of skin on their faces called nose leaves. Another fun fact, bats can live up to 30 years or more and can fly at speeds of up to 100 miles per hour. A male Brandt's Biotis from Siberia is known to have lived at least 41 years in the wild. He was recognized by the band number on his forearm each time he was caught and released by researchers over the years. Another fact, bats' wingspans range from about 6 inches to 6 feet. And also during hibernation, bats can survive in freezing temperatures even after being completely encased in ice. Their heartbeat drops to as low as 8 beats per minute compared to their normal heart rate of up to 1,300 beats per minute while in flight in the summer. And functions such as digestion and excretion shut down during that time. Females of most bat species have only one pup per year, and bat mothers can find their babies among thousands of other bats by their unique voices and scents. So some more fun bat facts. Bats have evolved over 60 million years to survive in a variety of habitats, and they can be found in nearly every type of habitat except extreme deserts and polar regions. Bats live on all continents except Antarctica. Another fact, the wings of bats have a bone structure that's similar to the human hand, and between their bones or fingers are 2 layers of thin, flexible, and tough skin. Bats have thumbs that stick out from their wings that allow them to grab onto walls and trees. And a bat can move its thumbs and fingers in different ways, just like us as humans. That enables them to quickly change their wing shape, speed, and direction. Another fun fact is that bat fingers are very long compared to the size of their body. If humans had fingers like bats, then our fingers would be longer than our legs. Also, most bats have very large ears in comparison to their bodies, and bats have the best hearing of all land mammals. Bats have the largest hearts relative to their body size of any mammal, and that's to help power their flight. A baby bat can weigh up to 1/3 of its mother's body weight, which is about equivalent to a 120-pound woman giving birth to a 40-pound baby. And bats are born very well developed to help them quickly reach adult size and become independent. So bats also cannot stand upright due to a very small pelvic girdle. Instead, they have special toes that lock, so when they're asleep upside down, they will not fall. And also, blood does not rush to their heads because they don't weigh enough for gravity to affect their circulation. And lastly, for centuries, humans have used bat guano as an essential ingredient in black powder for various types of explosives, including gunpowder. So bats certainly have an image problem. Most people think bats are aggressive or dirty animals, and this is largely due to media like movies, TV shows, and books that give bats a bad name. When people hear the word bat, they instantly think of bloodthirsty creatures who spread diseases like rabies. And this scariness is often reinforced at Halloween, which is coming up. So I thought I'd bust some myths tonight. So myth number 1, bats are blind. So many bats have small eyes and sensitive vision, but bats can see as well as most other mammals, and some bats can see up to 3 times better than humans. Myth number 2 is that all bats have rabies. In fact, Any mammal can contract rabies, but less than half of 1% of bats have rabies, which is a much lower rate of incidence than other mammals. Bats that do contract rabies are unlikely to come into contact with you and die fairly quickly from the virus. Rabies in bats is also singular, which means that one bat in a colony can be infected while the rest are healthy. And far more people die from dog attacks, bee stings, lightning strikes, and household accidents than rabies from bats. Cases of human rabies in the United States are very rare and have been steadily decreasing since the 1970s. Between 1997 and 2006, there were 17 cases of humans in the US contracting rabies from bats. And between 2009 and 2019, there were 13 cases. So this is only about 1 to 2 people in the whole United States each year. Let's see, myth number 3, bats get tangled in your hair. So bats are not interested in human hair and they do not build nests. Bat echolocation is highly sophisticated, enabling bats to detect obstacles as fine as human hair and easily avoid your head. Echolocation makes bats incredibly agile. If a bat does get close to a human, it's usually because there are swarms of insects around them. Myth number 4, bats attack people. So bats do not attack people and are not purposely aggressive. Bats are afraid of humans and avoid people as best they can. Myth number 5, all bats suck blood. So as I mentioned, most bats are insect eaters and help get rid of blood-sucking mosquitoes. Only 3 of the more than 1,400 bat species in the world are vampire bats. And vampire bats live in Mexico, Central America, and South America, and they lick blood from non-human animals. Contrary to popular belief, they do not suck blood, but instead they make a small incision and lap the blood up, which doesn't clot because of anticoagulants in the bat's saliva. Myth number 6, bats are dirty. In fact, bats are actually very clean and groom themselves regularly like cats. Some bats even groom each other. And our last myth is that bats are just flying mice. Well, bats are not rodents, for one. Bats are classified as their own unique order of mammals called Chiroptera, which in Greek means handwing. Bats are more closely related to humans than they are to mice. Bats also don't nest, chew, or claw their way into a structure like mice do. Also, most mice and other rodents live for 1 to 2 years or so. One little brown bat is known to have lived in the wild for 33 years, and the brant myotis from Siberia that I mentioned earlier, we know lived at least 41 years in the wild. So the moral of the story is, don't let bat myths play on your fears. Bats are actually really cute and friendly animals once you get to know them. So as you can see in this table here, there are 9 species of bats that live in Massachusetts, 8 of which are protected under the Massachusetts Endangered Species Act. 5 are state listed as endangered and 3 as special concern. And 2 of those are federally protected under the Federal Endangered Species Act. So the 3 migratory tree bats at the bottom of the table there, the silver-haired, eastern red, and hoary bat, were just added to the MESA list on August 16th, 2024. As species of special concern. So all of our bats in Massachusetts, as I said, they're all insect eating and they're all small. Just going to mention a few highlights in this table. See, the most common and widely distributed bat in Massachusetts is currently the big brown bat. The last hibernating colony of Indiana bats in Massachusetts was in a mine in Chester in 1939. The Myotis genus of bats, which is found in Massachusetts, that includes the little brown, northern long-eared, Indiana, eastern small-footed bat, and the tricolored bat, is the most broadly distributed terrestrial mammal in the world. And lastly, we separate our bats based on their preferred summer and winter habitats, as you can see in the table. So bats can live in all types of homes, including caves, mines, barns, attics, garages, sheds, church steeples, bridges, tunnels, and trees. So the tree bats in Massachusetts are the eastern red, silver-haired, and hoary bat. Again, these 3 species were just listed under MESA as species of special concern on August 16th. So all of our tree bats migrate south for the winter. They do not hibernate. I'm just going to briefly mention one fact about each of our 9 species. So for the eastern red bat, whereas females in most species of bats have only 1 pup per year, Red bats have the largest litter size of any bat, and they can have up to 5 pups per litter, and they often have twins. Silver-haired bats are the most uncommon tree bats in the state, with records from only 15 of our 351 towns. And the largest bat in Massachusetts is the hoary bat, with a 16-inch wingspan, which is still quite small compared to bats in other parts of the world, with wingspans up to 6 feet, like I mentioned. So our house and building bats in Massachusetts are the big brown and little brown bat. Don't read too much into the terms big and little, as they're both quite small bats and the size difference is only a few inches. So big brown bats frequently roost in houses, but they can still be found in trees and mines. During the winter, the big brown bat is the only bat in Massachusetts that prefers and commonly hibernates in buildings with a partial heat source. During the winter, little brown bats hibernate in limestone caves, abandoned mines, and old aqueducts where the humidity is high and the temperature rarely drops below freezing. In the spring and summer, female little brown bats form colonies consisting of hundreds of individuals. And big brown bats prefer more urban areas and are usually found in small colonies or even solo, like in this photo. Small colonies that are found in attics are often big brown bats, whereas larger colonies of 30 or more bats found in barns and other outbuildings could possibly be little brown bats. So the cave and mine bats in Massachusetts are the northern long-eared, eastern small-footed, tricolored, and Indiana bat. So for the northern long-eared bat, as the name implies, it is a small bat with large ears that when pushed forward extend at least 4 millimeters past its nose. The eastern small-footed bat is the smallest bat in the state with a wingspan of up to 10 inches. The tricolored bat can be identified by its weak, fluttery, erratic flight, which has given it the nickname moth bat. And the Indiana bat is considered a very social bat, as there can be 300 to 400 or more individuals per square foot. But as I mentioned, the last hibernating colony of the Indiana bat in Massachusetts was in 1939. So worldwide, bats are faced with a variety of threats, largely due to the result of human activity. Humans have wiped out entire species of bats and have caused many other species to become nearly extinct. So one threat to bats is habitat loss and degradation. Bats seek shelter under the peeling bark of dead trees. When trees are cut down, the homes of bats and their young are destroyed. Also, development of open spaces for roads or buildings and the draining of wetlands reduces natural habitat for bats. And further, fragmentation of land is dangerous to migrating bats because it alters their travel paths and makes migration more dangerous with less food and shelter available. Also, bats that roost in buildings are vulnerable to displacement during construction. Bats that roost in bridges are vulnerable during repairs and replacements. And cave roosting bats are affected by the reclamation of mines and closures of caves. So another threat to bats is pesticide use. So pesticides weaken exposed bats and makes it difficult for bats to find healthy food to eat. Pesticides can cause bats to go hungry from the lack of insects available, and bats may also drink water that is contaminated with pesticides. So I've recently received a lot of questions about the effect of aerial spraying for triple E control in Massachusetts. So since others may have the same question, I thought I'd just talk about that, take a minute to talk about this. So we're not aware of any specific research conducted to look at the effect of aerial triple E control in bats, and bats are very understudied as a group. The aerial product being used in Massachusetts is Anvil 10+10. It's a synthetic pyrethroid. It is applied when it is most likely to contact mosquitoes, which is during the nighttime hours. The formula used supplies just enough mosquito adulticide to be effective on mosquitoes. The product attacks the protein chitin, which composes the chitinous exoskeleton of mosquitoes. And it's listed as having low mammalian toxicity, and other insecticides that are currently being used are similar to this product, and they're not known to have serious effects on bats. It will obviously impact their environment because it will likely temporarily reduce their local food supply, but prey shifting is pretty common in bats, and there are other sources of food still readily available to bats during insecticide spraying. So the actual effect of that is hard to assess without more data collection. Also, the decline in bats is likely contributed to the elevated EEE activity in recent years, since bats are obviously essential in controlling insect populations, but there are other factors as well to consider, like precipitation, early warm temperatures, and bird populations, among other reasons. So to get back to this, other threats to bats, climate change. So climate change affects hibernation timing, either causing bats to go into hibernation later or emerge earlier. But either way, insects may not be available during these times, which could result in starvation for bats. Bats can also die from heat stress during heat waves and droughts, and also wildfires fueled by hot and dry conditions, intense storms and heavy rainfall, early season snow, and prolonged freezing temperatures can all kill bats or destroy their habitats. And changes in climate may also influence insect life cycles, which could affect food sources for bats. Another threat to bats is wind turbines. So migrating bats collide with the spinning blades of turbines, causing high mortality. With the ongoing expansion of wind power, it's estimated that wind turbines kill as many as 880,000 bats annually, which is about 150 bats being killed at each turbine per year. And bats can also suffer from extreme changes in air pressure close to the turbines, which causes a lung injury called barotrauma. Another threat to bats is fear and ignorance. Bats are one of the most misunderstood animals, and this can cause people to intentionally harm bats in their habitats. And a few other threats not listed on the slide are roost closure, overexploitation, extermination, and unregulated guano mining. And lastly, white nose syndrome, which I'll discuss in much more detail in just a minute. But all these factors, combined with their slow reproductive rate of only one pup per year, cause recovery from population declines to be incredibly slow. It makes bats extremely vulnerable to extinction, and it's often difficult to spot significant declines until the situation is dire. So white nose syndrome, as I mentioned, is another threat to bats. So the term white nose syndrome comes from the fact that bats with this condition look like they dip their faces in powdered sugar. And the white powdery substance on their noses is a fungus, and that fungus can also be found on the bare skin of their ears and wings. The fungus was first observed in bats hibernating in a cave near Albany, New York in 2006. In 2009, the fungus was described as a newly discovered species and named Geomyces destructans. But the fungus is now known as Pseudogymnoascus destructans, or just PD for short. The fungus grows best in cool temperatures and high humidity, similar to the conditions found in bat winter hibernation sites like caves. So usually bats that hibernate over the winter have enough fat to last them until they emerge in late April and early May. In the spring, there are obviously plenty of insects available to eat, so the bats can replenish their energy reserves. However, at caves and mines with white nose, the aggressive fungus attacks and grows on the bats while they're inactive and their body temperature is below 50 degrees. The fungus irritates and damages the skin so much that it rouses the bats and increases their metabolism. White nose infected bats wake up from their winter torpor as often as every 3 to 4 days, as opposed to the normal 10 to 20 days. They can be seen flying outside in the daytime in the cold of winter in a desperate attempt to find something to eat. And some of the hibernating bats quickly deplete their precious fat reserves, and they ultimately starve to death. The fungus also creates holes in the wings, which leads to dehydration and compromises their immune systems. The fungus spreads mostly through bat-to-bat contact, but the fungus can live in areas without bats, so the bats can also pick up the fungus from the environment, like on the walls of caves. At the largest Massachusetts bat hibernation site, which is an abandoned 3-tiered emery mine in Chester, there were about 10,000 little brown bats in early winter 2007-2008. But white nose syndrome spread rapidly across Massachusetts, and by the end of winter 2008-2009, nearly every bat had been killed, and only 14 individual bats remained at that one mine in Chester. So the introduction of the fungus that causes white nose syndrome resulted in greater than 99% mortality of the bats in Massachusetts hibernacula in the first 2 years. So the little brown bat used to be the most abundant and widespread bat species in Massachusetts, but since the onset of white nose syndrome, um, the state's population of little brown bats has dwindled to less than 1% of what it once was. More than half of the 47 bat species found in the United States rely on hibernation to survive the winter. 12 of these species, including 2 endangered and 1 threatened species, have been confirmed with white nose syndrome in North America. And the causative fungus, or PD, that has been found in an additional 9 species, including 2 endangered species, without confirmation of the disease. The hardest hit species are the northern long-eared bat, little brown bat, and tricolored bat. White nose has hit the northern long-eared bat particularly hard, threatening the species with extinction. White nose has killed over 90% of northern long-eared, little brown, and tricolored bat populations in fewer than 10 years. And because of the devastating mortality that has resulted from white nose syndrome in Massachusetts, all 4 of our bat species that spend their winters or the winters in caves and mines have been listed as endangered on the Massachusetts endangered species list. That's the little brown, northern long-eared, small-footed, and tricolored bats. Keep in mind that our 5th cave bat, the Indiana bat, was already listed prior to white nose. So an estimated 6.7 million bats have died in the U.S. since 2006 due to white nose syndrome. So we believe that many of our bats that are summer residents in Massachusetts spend the winter hibernating in this cave called the Aeolus Cave in Vermont. The photo here shows the floor of the cave just completely littered in bat carcasses. This photo was taken just after white nose had hit. White nose syndrome continues to spread rapidly and has caused catastrophic mortality of bats that spend the winter in caves and mines. No one knows how to stop or even slow the continuing spread of white nose. No one can predict just how far it will eventually go and how many bats will die in the process. There's no cure for white nose syndrome, but scientists from all over the world are working together to study the disease, how it spreads and infects bats, and what we can do to control it. There are several biological, chemical, immunological, and mechanical treatments that are in progress and will hopefully lead to increased survival of bats from this devastating disease. These disease treatments includes things like applying various substances directly to bats to kill or weaken PD, making environmental changes to bat habitats to slow the fungal growth, a vaccine to boost resistance to white nose syndrome, and genetic manipulation to reduce symptoms of PD. So white nose syndrome is now the #1 threat to bats, causing mortality rates that approach 90 to 100% at some sites. And scientists predict that the once abundant and widespread little brown bat will be reduced to just 1% of its pre-white nose syndrome population by the year 2030. And scientists also believe that white nose syndrome has caused the most dramatic decline in North American wildlife in over 100 years since the extinction of the passenger pigeon. So bats with white nose syndrome have been confirmed in 40 states and 8 Canadian provinces, and the evidence of the fungus that causes white nose have been confirmed in 3 additional states and 2 Canadian provinces. So this map shows the occurrence of white nose syndrome or the causative fungus PD in North America. The black X represents the epicenter where white nose was first detected in February 2006, and solid or striped colored counties are areas in which 1 or more bats of at least 1 species have been observed with signs of white nose or carrying PD. So solid colored counties are confirmed and striped is suspected. So the color for each area represents the first winter in which the indicated status was determined. The cooler colors are where white nose was first detected, and the warmer colors are where white nose has been confirmed more recently. It is hypothesized that the disease was brought to the US from Europe and was accidentally transported here by humans on recreational caving gear that was not properly disinfected, where the fungus found the perfect conditions to flourish. In Europe and Asia, 14 bat species have been confirmed with diagnostic symptoms, but the fungus evolved with European bats, therefore allowing the bats to coexist and adapt and not be harmed by the fungus. Now you know why bats are important and the threats that they face. I thought I'd talk about what would happen if we were to lose bats. So bats provide ecological services by removing vast numbers of insects off the landscape each night, which adds up to millions of dollars of pest control value. But the worth of bats goes far beyond dollars and cents. If we were to lose bats, there would be large negative environmental and economic impacts, as insect populations would obviously increase. Farmers would experience more crop damage from insects and would have to spend more money on pesticides to protect their crops. An increase in pesticide use would release more chemicals into the environment, and could also result in human health impacts. But on the other hand, if farmers chose not to increase pesticide use, then there would be a decrease in local food production due to crop damage from insects, which would also drive up food costs. So what's been done in Massachusetts to protect the bats? In Massachusetts, all 5 of the most important bat hibernacula are close to public access to protect the few surviving bats from disturbance. MassWildlife acquired the 2 largest hibernacula in the state, which were both abandoned mines, and installed gates on those 2 plus 1 additional mine to protect the bats. The gates are very successful at minimizing disturbance while allowing the free movement of bats. There is a locking removable piece for entry to allow for entry for surveys and other work. But although the closures cannot protect the bats from white nose syndrome, they can prevent people from carrying the fungus in on their clothes and shoes to other locations and prevent stress-induced disturbance of any of the surviving bats. And unfortunately, we have had vandalism at one of the sites where a crossbar was cut. But in 2022, we were able to contract with a local welder to repair the damaged section of the gate. And it's been okay ever since. So for the past several years, since white nose hit in Massachusetts, MassWildlife has really been pushing bat outreach and education with things such as new and updated web pages, a new homeowner's guide to bats, MassWildlife magazine and newsletter articles, a new guide to bat houses, creating new and improved bat handouts, soliciting for public reports of bat colonies, doing presentations like this, also interviews and informational displays, and having volunteers from the public and citizen scientists monitor our bat houses each summer. Getting people to understand bats is the first step in changing societal attitudes about these flying mammals and persuading people that bats are as important to the state's natural heritage as bald eagles. MassWildlife recently acquired a new 78-acre parcel abutting a wildlife management area we already own. A large abandoned copper mine runs from the existing WMA beneath the newly acquired property, and the vertical shaft is on the new parcel. So now that the land has been acquired by MassWildlife, it is now part of the WMA, which includes full public access. The shaft was a potential safety hazard for people who accidentally discover it and for people who may seek to explore it. So MassWildlife and MassDOT installed a perimeter fence around the shaft in May 2021 to prevent disturbance, restrict unauthorized access, and address the public safety concerns. So this project is protective of bats, protective of the public, and allows for complete conservation of the entirety of this important hibernaculum. MassWildlife has been conducting population counts of hibernating bats for over 40 years, or since 1979, I believe. We have decades of winter survey data indicating that our bat populations have been slowly increasing for the last half century until white nose syndrome hit. Abandoned mines and natural caves in western Massachusetts act as winter hibernacula. MassWildlife currently has more than 33 total hibernacula sites. That includes historic and current sites as well as buildings for all species. And this number continues to increase as we are made aware of old sites and as new sites are discovered. We currently have a data backlog, but there are several historic sites and new buildings that will eventually be accounted for to increase our number of known hibernacula. So our biologists carefully enter the mines and caves in late winter to identify and count individual bats. They check for signs of white nose syndrome and check the mine or cave security. In recent years, counts of the major hibernacula have been completed annually, while The lesser or smaller sites are done in alternating years. The table here displays data from our past 5 surveys, noting that surveys were not conducted in 2021 due to COVID. MassWildlife staff surveyed 10 hibernacula this past February and March, of which bats were present at 9 sites. A total of 380 bats were counted, and that includes 13 big brown bats, 297 little brown bats, 23 tricoloreds, 43 small-footeds, and 3 northern long-eared bats. Evidence of white nose syndrome was observed on a few bats at 2 of the surveyed sites, and 4 dead bats were found at 1 site. MassWildlife and MassDOT collaborated on a project to construct and install 56 4-chamber bat houses in 2020. DOT funded the project through their Linking Landscapes program. MassWildlife organized the project and ordered and cut the lumber. And then Boy Scout troops assembled the bat houses, and they passed the assembled bat houses back to MassWildlife, where our staff painted the bat houses. In 2021, I started a volunteer monitoring program to monitor the 30 bat houses that were installed on MassWildlife properties. The remainder of the 56 bat houses were installed on DOT properties. So our MassWildlife volunteers are asked to visit their assigned bat houses once a month in June, July, and August, noting whether the bat houses are occupied, the number of bats present, any required maintenance, and any dead bats that are found. Monitors are asked to submit photos of bats and any noticeable wear and tear on the bat houses. So in 2023, 18 volunteers conducted the requested monitoring and submitted a brief report for each of the 3 months. Of the 30 bat houses that were monitored at 28 locations, 3 of the bat houses were occupied by bats. 7 additional locations had bats observed flying in the area or other signs of possible occupancy by bats, such as like guano or urine staining below the bat house. But it was not confirmed whether bats had actually taken up residency in the bat houses. So 2023 marked the 3rd year of monitoring as part of this program, and results showed that 10% of the bat houses were occupied and another 23% showed promising potential for future occupancy. So monitoring for 2024 just wrapped up. I'm still waiting on a couple of reports actually, so I have not yet analyzed this year's data. In 2021, MassWildlife and MassDOT collaborated on yet another project to measure air temperature and relative humidity at several hibernacula in Western Massachusetts. The loggers were initially set up to collect 2 data points per day or every 12 hours, but were changed to 4 data points per day or every 6 hours. So MassWildlife staff deployed 8 data loggers in 6 caves and mines in August 2021. The loggers were removed in June 2022 to download the data and then redeployed in that fall 2022. The loggers were removed again in June 2023 to download the data. So although 8 loggers were deployed for the first year of the project, only 3 were redeployed for the 2022 to 23 winter. The sensors were set up to take readings 4 readings per day or every 6 hours, and were moved in June 2023. So one of the loggers was placed in a section of a mine where the most bats are typically found. Another logger was replaced one in a mine that had previously died, and the 3rd logger replaced one in a cave that was previously set up with an incorrect reading interval. So the results from 2022 to 23 show that the relative humidity at each site is essentially 100%. The temperature averages ranged from 44 to 46 degrees, with the highest high being 52.7 in October 22, and the lowest low being 38.1 in February 23, which is on par with what you would expect. So the humidity is high, but the temperature never drops below freezing, which are the perfect conditions for a PD to grow. No loggers were placed this year, but we did loan a few data loggers to the Department of Conservation and Recreation, or DCR, so that they could collect some data in some of their hibernacula. So our overall results of all of these studies have showed that white nose syndrome has peaked in Massachusetts after 99.9% mortality of known hibernating little brown bats. This means that less than 0.5% of the little brown bat population had some level of natural immunity. Populations are now holding steady, but they remain very low for all cave bats. There has been some level of recovery from white nose syndrome, but recovery will be very slow and will include bats that have some level of natural immunity. So the population of bats at the Chester mine, the one I mentioned that had 10,000 bats pre-white nose syndrome, dropped to 14 once white nose hit. It has since risen to about 70 individuals this past February and March. Currently, the big brown bats are now the most common bat statewide, whereas before, like I mentioned, used to be the little brown bat. Through acoustic monitoring, it has been determined that little brown bats still occur statewide in the summer. Our interpretation of this is that aside from natural immunity, some of these bats are likely hibernating in caves outside of Massachusetts, like in New York and Vermont, while other bats may not be exposed to the fungus if they hibernate in caves and mines that lack appropriate habitat for the fungus. Little brown bats that hibernate in cold but dry caves survive because the fungus cannot grow in dry conditions. And that's also why our big brown bat population was not seriously affected, because most big brown bats hibernate in cold and dry areas like in attics. So a few additional northern long-eared bat hibernacula and new little brown bat maternity roosts have been documented. And by misnetting and capturing juvenile and lactating female northern long-eared bats in the summer and fall, Nantucket has confirmed successful breeding of northern long-eared bats. So I only discussed in detail MassWildlife's research, but there are several other state agencies, organizations, and individuals across Massachusetts that are studying bats. Since I'm the state lead for bats, these overall results combine MassWildlife's research with other researchers' results, just to get the big picture. So bats clearly need our help. You can help bats by being a citizen scientist and spreading the word about reporting colonies of 10 or more bats to MassWildlife. Help dispel myths and fears about bats and help others learn why bats are actually fascinating and beneficial. Protect natural habitat for bats. If you have old, dead, or dying trees on your property, leave them standing as potential roost sites for bats if it's safe to do so. And also protect streams and wetlands around your property. It also help bats if you must exclude or evict bats from your home, ensure the process is safe and humane by following our recommendations found in our Homeowner's Guide to Bats, and reduce pesticide use to ensure that bats have a reliable and safe food source. You can also help bats by creating a bat-friendly landscape in your backyard by adding water features such as a pond and night blooming flowers. Since I always get a lot of questions about this, the night blooming flower question or part, I'll just mention that many white flowering species are moth pollinated at night and would therefore be good plant food. White flowers attract the most moths and other nocturnal insects, although other light colored flowers like pink and light yellow are good too. It's important to plant a variety of plants that flower throughout the growing season, spring, summer, and fall flowering plants, so that there's nectar flowing and nocturnal insects flying in the areas from spring through fall. Also, avoid disturbing bats by staying out of caves and mines where bats are hibernating in the winter. And lastly, install a bat house to provide an alternative roost site and a secure home for bats. So, since MassWildlife does not have the capacity to conduct much survey work ourselves, aside from the winter hibernacula surveys and the data logger research that I mentioned, we've focused on bat outreach and education for the past few years, as I mentioned before. MassWildlife has been pushing bat houses because they are an easy way for the public and citizen scientists to get involved with bat conservation. So bat houses come in many shapes and sizes. These are just a few extreme examples that I found. So there's a 20-foot bat tower built in 1918 in Comfort, Texas by Dr. Charles Campbell, a bat condo in Shelburne Falls, Vermont, and a series of bat and bird houses together in Fort McCoy, Wisconsin. So here are some photos of bat houses in Massachusetts that have been taken by our photographer or contractors and submitted by the public. These are much more practical and realistic examples. But the style of your bat house depends on the tools, wood, and building materials you have available, as well as your skills and budget. But regardless, the goal is to make a bat house that mimics the narrow, rough space between the bark and trunk of a tree, as that would be the bat's ideal nursery. Bats like tight spaces, so the space inside of a bat house is very tight and narrow, unlike a birdhouse, which would need to be large enough to house a nest. Bat houses are constructed using rough wood so the bats can hang on without slipping and falling. And they also need to be nice and warm for their babies to grow. That's why bat houses are painted a dark color in most climates and why all seams are caulked to keep the heat in and the water out. Bats prefer houses that are at least 2 feet tall and 14 inches wide. They can contain a single roosting chamber or multiple chambers separated by vertical partitions, but each chamber should be 3/4 of an inch wide. And the backboard of the bat house should extend 3 to 6 inches below the bottom of the roosting chamber to create a landing pad, which helps bats to safely access their roost. Small air vents that are a 1/2 inch wide could be placed on the front of the bat house to allow for airflow. So a common single chamber bat house is capable of housing up to about 50 bats, while larger multiple chamber designs can attract nursery colonies of 200 or more bats. So although bats will use both single and multi-chambered bat houses, larger bat houses with multiple chambers improves the ability of bats to regulate their temperature and can hold a larger colony size. So this is a simple bat house design. There are many more elaborate and detailed designs available for a variety of roost sizes and types. There are also step-by-step instructions and several videos available on the internet to help you build your own bat house. There are many bat house kits available to do it yourself, as well as like ready to install pre-assembled bat houses. You can purchase bat houses online through a variety of retailers or at your local home improvement store. So how do bat houses help bats? So bat houses are very helpful in providing alternative roosting sites for bats that are excluded from homes. Bat houses also provide artificial roost sites for bats that are forced out of natural roosts by tree clearing. And lastly, bat houses give females a safe, warm place to raise their young. Due to habitat loss and degradation, it is becoming harder for bats to locate roost sites to raise their young. So by installing a bat house, you can provide mothers and their pups with a safe, warm home that's free of white nose syndrome. So by installing bat houses, that not only helps bats, but also helps you as the landowner by reducing the chance of human bat contact with bats and protecting your yard from insects like mosquitoes and disease-carrying insects. Bat houses also provide natural fertilization for your lawn or garden, and they allow for a greater bat presence, which means fewer pesticides are needed.
Jennifer, oh, sorry to interrupt.
No worries.
We should probably move to Q&A soon. I should have probably said something sooner, but I've been really enjoying this and kind of lost track of.
Oh, okay. Sure.
But yeah, we should move to Q&A just whenever you find a good stopping point. Sorry.
So just lastly, I'll say, I invite you to all stay connected to and support NHESP. You can stay connected by subscribing to our monthly e-newsletter and connecting with us on social media. So unlike many state agencies, the NHESP is not funded by taxpayer dollars. Most of our funding comes through donations, grants, the state budget line item, and regulatory review fees. So if you'd like to support the work we do, you can donate to NHESP online via credit card or electronic check to your Mass Fish Hunt account, which is where you buy licenses by check, or you can contribute on your state income tax form. We are line 33A, which is the Endangered Wildlife Conservation Fund. But all the information that I had to skip, most of it is available on our website. We have several bat web pages and resources available. But yeah, I'm happy, I'm not a bat expert or biologist, so I probably won't have answers to every single question, but I'm happy to try to answer questions.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. That was so informative and just fantastic.
Of course.
I know we had a few questions in the chat. Um, and if anyone would like to unmute or you can raise your hand, we can also do questions like that, or you can put more in the chat. I'm going to leave my video off because my computer's still sort of been lagging, and I think this helps. So one of the first ones in the chat was about light pollution. Does light pollution impact bats?
Absolutely. So lights, as I mentioned, they can disorient bats and just really make it difficult for them to navigate and hunt for insects. Um, so, light pollution over the cities, obviously they're still going, it's more of like a direct, like bright lights shining in your backyard at night or in your driveway are what are really going to impact bats the most. But also light pollution, like over larger cities and towns, also affects bats.
Makes sense. The next one is, are there really three different species of vampire bats?
Yes. But like I said, they are found in Mexico, Central America, and South America. So no need to worry about them unless you go on vacation.
And then another question. So someone said that there are many bats around my home. My hummingbird feeder is emptied out overnight. Could that be the bats eating the sugar water?
I don't believe that's likely in our area. Like I mentioned, all of our bats are insect eating. In other parts of the world, there are nectar feeding bats that I guess could be interested in sugar water. But it's more like I know in my own home, my hummingbird feeder is constantly depleted by bees and ants. um, and the wind that dumps some of it out. But I don't believe that bats in our area would be interested in the sugar water.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing going on. Uh,
Yeah,
so I wonder if you could, I don't know, put up a trail camera or something.
yeah, that's a great idea. A game camera, yeah.
The next question, and again, if anyone has any that they don't want to put in the chat, feel free to just unmute or raise your hand. Otherwise, I'll just keep going through these. Can bats contract any of the diseases carried by the mosquitoes they consume?
I honestly don't know the answer to that question. I don't want to provide any wrong info.
That's fair.
Great question, but yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I'm just a bat conservation program coordinator. I'm not a bat biologist or bat expert, so definitely don't have answers to all the questions.
There's also a lot to know and a lot of questions.
Exactly. I do know a lot about bats, just not everything.
Okay, the next one. Is there any way, Sandra was wondering if there's any way that Jennifer can finish her planned presentation after, I think maybe the Q&A is what Sandra was wondering.
I'm happy to stay on if anybody wants to, and I don't know, yeah, whatever.
Clapping her
I'm
hand.
happy. There was only a couple slides to go, so it wasn't too much anyways, but I'm happy to finish going through it if for those who would like to stay on.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Once we get through the questions here, that would be great if you don't mind.
Sure.
Thank you. Next question, is bat guano toxic to human?
So, there are two diseases that are commonly associated with bats. That's rabies, as I just mentioned, and histoplasmosis. So histoplasmosis is a respiratory illness that's caused by a fungus that's associated with the droppings of bats and birds as well. So if dust containing the fungal spores is stirred up and inhaled, it could cause a lung infection. However, this illness is extremely uncommon in Massachusetts. I honestly don't even know if there's been a single case in Massachusetts. It's much more common in hot, humid areas down south and in the tropics. So if that question happens if that person came up with that question because they may have bat guano in their attic or something, we recommend always wearing some type of mask or face protection, goggles and mask if you're going to attempt to clean up bat guano, like from your home. And you could always like mist bat guano with some water to moisten it. That way the spores aren't like released from being so dry. But you can just gently sweep them up to get rid of them if needed. I actually, when I first bought my house, I cleaned tons of bat guano out of my own attic, and just wore a mask and goggles and was perfectly fine. Like I said, you in Massachusetts, you really, I guess you could keep it in the back of your head and take extra precautions, but it's really not something to be concerned about unless you're in a more hot, humid, tropical area. And
Great.
also, you can also get histoplasmosis from bird droppings.
Mhm. That's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah.
The next question, we have installed new bat houses and the swallows have occupied the bat houses. How to prevent this?
Um, so that's the may answer that in some of the slides that I didn't get a chance to go over. But I'm assuming, if swallows are occupying a bat house, it's likely that the chambers are too wide or too large. So birds shouldn't even be able to fit inside of the chambers of a bat house. The chamber should only be about 3/4 of an inch wide, which is really small for a bird to be able to fit into. So it's likely that the design of the bat house is incorrect. I All of the bat houses that are installed as part of MassWildlife's bat house monitoring program, we've never had birds or swallows occupy bat houses. We've had like mud daubers, paper wasps, things like that, spiders, but no other like actual like birds or anything. So it's more likely that the house is not designed correctly. Take a look and see if the chambers are too wide that is allowing birds to get in. But if whomever asked that wants to hang around, I may go into more detail in that in the other slides.
Great. Could the BT pesticide used in water for mosquito larvae harm bats?
I don't know. I don't know. So today I was just thinking back to an email or an issue that's going on currently where a condo association sprayed an insecticide that ended up killing some bats. Of course, they didn't consult with us first. And so we're trying to do some research to determine some more appropriate insecticides that are wildlife friendly or bat safe. But I don't know much about the BT pesticide. My assumption is that, yeah, it could harm bats, as most pesticides will. There are some, wildlife friendly, bat safe pesticides, insecticides out there. I just don't know. Like I said, just today this came up, and so I plan to do some research about safer alternatives.
Fantastic. As the bats make recovery from WNS and evolve to exist with PD, are the different species of bats coming back in the same proportions? Are any of these bats making a slow recovery?
So, um, so I only really know about our Massachusetts species. So the little brown bat, northern long-eared bat, tricolored, small-footed bats. So they all are making extremely slow recoveries. And it's hard to measure like the difference in recoveries amongst the species. I also don't know much about that. I know that like across the US, there are some areas that are still, like Massachusetts, we are seeing a slow recovery, but there are still some areas that, have kind of like plateaued for some of their species. I was talking to a researcher a couple weeks ago, where there are some areas of the U.S. that still have declines or haven't made a recovery yet, as it's still spreading across the U.S. But I don't know the difference in recovery rates for species.
Makes sense. This question might have been answered already. Oh, I missed one actually. Uh, will your PowerPoint be available for us to download anywhere? Also, thank you for the great presentation.
So the presentation was recorded. I don't know where you guys will be storing or sharing that. But I won't be posting my PowerPoint anywhere. Just, a lot of time and effort goes into creating PowerPoints, and I don't want my presentation to be replicated, so easily. But a lot of the information that I've talked about is available on our mass.gov, MassWildlife web pages, or in our homeowners guide to bats. We have tons of resources available online where I pull a lot of my information from.
Great. Yeah, that totally makes sense. And this recording will be on Beat's YouTube channel
Okay, great.
within the next week or so. Due to rabies, most animal control departments kill the bat in order to test. How to test safely?
So you can only test a bat once it has died. So there's no way to really test it safely, unfortunately. So anytime there is a suspected rabies case, or the bat is killed, even or if there's any time a bat comes into contact with a human or pet, the bat is killed to be tested for rabies. That way, the human or animal can get appropriate, rabies vaccinations after the fact. But no, I don't. I don't believe that there's a safe way to test for rabies.
It's unfortunate. I think this is the last question. Oh, Jade, do you have something?
Oh, just wanted to be sure you got Sean Flynn's question on where to install the houses.
Yeah, so that's the last one that I see. Yeah, would you recommend installing bat houses on trees, houses, or independent poles?
So that's definitely one of the things I didn't get to. So uh, MassWildlife recommends installing bat houses on like structures like the side of a house, garage, barn, something like that, where one side of the bat house is shielded from, winds, drafts, things like that. Bat houses that are installed on trees are, they're likely to be shaded by foliage. They can also harbor predators. And independent poles, we do sometimes recommend poles depending on the location. So MassWildlife has installed some bat houses on poles, but when we do so, it's always two houses that are back to back, to again prevent, excessive winds from one side. If you're installing it on a pole, also need to consider that it's not installed like on the top of a hill where it'd be exposed to excessive winds. But bottom line is we recommend, number one, to install them like on the side of a building of some type. Those seem to be the most effective. But I'll go into more detail if anybody wants to stick around.
Okay, great. Yeah, those were all the questions, I think. So if you're willing to share the rest of your
Yeah, sure.
seems like we have a good sized audience here.
Yep, absolutely. Let me get my stuff back. Okay, can you all see that on my screen again?
Yes.
Yep, okay. So the location, temperature, and design are key factors in bat house occupancy. Bat houses should be mounted in areas that receive 6 to 8 hours of direct sunlight every day. Bat houses should face the south, east, or southeast to catch the heat of the sun as it rises. We want the internal temperature of a bat house to be about 80 to 100 degrees in the summer, with an average of about 85 for the mothers to raise their babies. And bat houses should be installed in an area free of obstruction within a 20-foot radius and 12 to 20 feet above the ground for plenty of entrance and exit clearance and to protect against predators. See, bat houses that are located near a source of water, like along streams, creeks, ponds, rivers, lakes, etc., are the most successful due to a source of insects. And you also want to install bat houses away from bright lights and avoid shining or reflective objects on the ground under the bat house, as they may disorient bats. So bat houses mounted directly, as I was just saying, like to a house, barn, garage, or other like structure are the most attracted to bats, because this eliminates drafts on one side of the bat house and provides a more stable temperature inside the bat house. Bats are not likely to use bat houses mounted on live trees, because foliage can block out the sun and branches can harbor predators, as I was just discussing. Poles seem to work well in warmer climates, or if two houses are mounted back to back. Also, like I just said, you don't want to install a bat house on the top of a hill where it may be exposed to excessive winds. And, if it's on a structure, just ensure that there's no vents blowing air at the bat house. Bat houses can really be installed at any time of the year, but they're more likely to be occupied during the first summer if they are installed before bats emerge from hibernation in the spring. And one thing I always mention is that there has to already be an existence of bats nearby. Bats have to find new roost sites on their own and investigate new roosting opportunities while they're out foraging at night. But installing a bat house isn't like putting an open sign on a storefront. And also evidence strongly suggests that lures or attractants, like I've heard of making a paste from bat guano in water and painting it on a bat house. So evidence suggests that won't actually attract bats to a bat house. There are no known methods for attracting bats, but you can certainly encourage them by creating suitable roosting habitat and ensuring your bat house is properly designed. So there's a greater chance of occupancy if you follow these guidelines, and bats are very loyal to their summer roosts and should return yearly once they take up residence in a bat house. So in 2017, I developed this inclusive guide to bat houses, which is available on our website and in the new printing of the Massachusetts Homeowners Guide to Bats. It contains information on why bat houses are important, tips for building and buying a bat house, installation recommendations for the best chance of bats occupying your bat house, tips for encouraging bats to choose your bat house as their new home, and a bat house FAQ. And then, like I mentioned, we have several resources and tons of information on bats available on our website. We have these web pages listed here. There's our survey to report colonies of 10 or more bats. There's the Living with Bats printable fact sheet, our Homeowner's Guide to Bats, which is available electronically and in print at any of our 6 offices. And we also have the Massachusetts Wildlife Magazine article on bats. There's been 2 articles, I believe. One is online, but if you're interested in both articles, you could get them from Westboro. I think that was it. And then quickly went through this. Yeah, that's it.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much, Jennifer, and thank you for being willing to stay on later to get
Yeah, of course.
of it.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I hope everyone enjoyed the presentation. Yeah.
Lots of thank yous in the chat also. Super.
Yeah, great. Yes, awesome. Great to hear.
And thank you everyone who was able to stick around.
Yes, definitely. Sorry to hold you all.